The last 10 years have been one of constant change in the consumer products industry. In fact, it could probably be best described as the perfect storm. Because as you look at the macroeconomic environment of very flat economic growth in most of the developed world, but growth in the developing world, and at the same time having the pressures of the need to come up with the revenue and the money to fuel that expansion, and yet businesses which are principally based in developed markets, it's been much a greater struggle than you would imagine. And if you extrapolate that into what the pressures have been for those consumer products companies to deal with, they've had the ability or the inability, because of their fractionalized way of how they run those discrete operations across the individual categories they compete in or the locations, of really bringing together enough synergy that they can generate and become the banker and the self-funder of all that growth. So it's been a drastic struggle. You've had a dramatic collapse of the life cycle of the markets in which these companies compete. And with the collapse of that, the need to really integrate how they're making business decisions, the speed at which they need to make business decisions today versus 10 years ago is dramatically different. It can be measured in a clock speed of minutes and hours versus days and weeks. You no longer have the luxury of buffering with cash and people and extra people to make decisions or to catch up for mistakes that you make. So the thing that has dramatically changed has been that time compression of the need to react to what's going on in the marketplace. So if you aren't able to make those business decisions faster, you literally become a victim of the circumstance. You become an also-ran in terms of the competitive nature of your business model. The fickle nature of consumer products is one where time-elapsed nature of a consumer being satisfied with something that was on the shelf and available for sale back as little as 3 years ago could be still measured in from time I introduced to time a consumer wants to see something new could be 3 to 6 months. Today that can be as little as 2 weeks. 2 weeks, the life cycle of when you're dissatisfied and looking for an improvement in the process. So while in one way you say, hey, the one thing that we all share in common as humans is a desire to keep a standard non-changed position. We hate change, but yet our preferences continue to change. You can't buy a cell phone where you don't want 5 more features than the one you had 6 months ago. And oh, by the way, at a cost that you spent less than you did 6 months ago. So more for less continues to compound. Those cycles, the decisions, the infrastructure, it all simply wraps together. Those that are at the front of the pack have understood and started to incorporate how to make those layered on business decisions differently than standalone decisions. Because I can impact my share, my profitability by making creative trade-off decisions, even when I may not be able to satisfy you on what you primarily were looking for the first time. "10 years ago, cloud computing was a dream. 10 years ago, companies that were large consumer products entities had no other choice than individual standalone applications for how to execute the daily transactional mass. You have to remember, step back for a minute and recognize that in an industry like consumer products, you're talking about products that are selling millions or billions of units a month for an average firm. So whether that's a Coca-Cola or a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever or a Johnson & Johnson, the category may be different, but the consumption trends are the same. So that infrastructure was very much application dependent on how work could get done, how data could be available to figure out if things weren't working well. Did you make what you expected to make today? Did you have available for consumption what was expected to be available for sale? Was there a mix problem in what you projected you were going to sell in the market? Instead of selling the red one, you're selling the green one now. So the time collapse, this application infrastructure, made it very difficult. So you had to buffer with either cash, investment in inventory, or people throughout your operation to make up for the shortcomings. Today, the ability to lay over decision-making processes that aren't infrastructure-based, that can bring pieces of operational data about your current performance right now, just in time, and make it visible in a very tangible and simple way for executives to make not only decisions about today, but preemptive decisions about where they want the operation to run tomorrow and the week after that. That would not have been possible 10 years ago. It is radically possible today.